It's common knowledge that our children, especially our boys, are not near grade level in the area of math. How do kids initially get behind in math? What is taking place in the classroom, and what year do they start to get behind in math?
So I think that a lot of our children get behind in math from the beginning, from the moment that they enter the classroom. You know, if they're going to public schools, charter schools, even private schools, a lot of times they're not prepared for math class, right? There have to be prerequisite skills that children have to be imbued with in order that when they walk into the classroom, they have a certain level of confidence and ability to perform when the teacher presents new information, right? Oftentimes our children are overwhelmed because they've never heard of certain things. You know, they never heard of like, factors and multiples, and they may not know their multiplication facts from memory, up to 12 times 12. So, and I think because as a community and as a society, we've been conditioned to just outsource math education completely, which is a problem, right? So if we think about the comparison between like ELA, English language arts, and mathematics, and how children perform in the ELA spaces as opposed to math spaces, right? Not to say that, some students do have anxiety when they go into ELA class. Some students don't want to raise their hand and read out loud because they have, kind of like trepidation about reading in front of the class. But there's less of that in ELA than there is in the math class. And I think that that's because from the time they're born, if they're speaking the English language as a first language, they're being indoctrinated into the English language and they're practicing the English language, from birth. They're listening to their parents talk. They're listening to grandparents, uncles, aunts. They're listening to, media. They're listening to the English language. They're constantly immersed within the English language.
So they're not being exposed to the math language like the
Exactly.
English language.
They're not immersed in the language of math. They're not immersed in the concepts of math. So when they go into math classrooms, they're overwhelmed. It's like they're getting hit over the head with all these new terminologies, new topics, new concepts. So, and that's when like a lot of times this anxiety creeps in and grabs a hold of our children.
But based on your experience, like what age? I've read things where it's like, if they're not up to a level in fourth grade, because what I've witnessed personally in education is that I don't know. I can't. That's what I'm asking. I can't pinpoint the year, but it seems like because they don't have that foundation, they just stay behind for the duration of their schooling.
Definitely, especially with mathematics, because it's so cumulative. It's like you can't escape that. Like, and I would say this, and I tell people this all the time: the multiplication facts are key. Now, of course, you need to understand your addition facts and your subtraction facts from memory, right? It also helps to understand the concept behind like when addition is taking place, what is actually happening with the numbers when subtraction is taking place, what's actually happening with the numbers and the relationship between addition and subtraction. But then once you do that, then you got to memorize your multiplication facts, right? You shouldn't just memorize them. You should also understand the concept of what is actually happening when you're doing like 9 times 3, right? It's repeated addition, 9 3 times, 9 times 3, 9 3 times, 9 plus 9 plus 9, right? And understanding like those relationships between numbers. A lot of students never memorize their multiplication facts. A lot of adults don't have their multiplication facts memorized, up to 12 times 12. And you can go beyond 12 times 12. We can go past 144. We can get up to, the 15 facts, the 14 facts, 13, 16, 17. We can do that. A lot of times, a lot of people don't do it. So we don't really even consider doing that. But there's nothing holding us back from doing it. And I think the more, the better. So I would say that not knowing multiplication facts from heart is such a hidden problem because it affects like having taught higher level math classes in high school, algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, trig, all of that. A lot of the problems students have and a lot of math teachers can attest to this. When you really break it down, like it's not even the new content that they don't really get. It's the foundation and just not knowing off the top of your head 7 times 8 is 56.
All right. The second part to the question is right. What can parents do to help their children get on grade level in the subject of math?
So there's several things that parents can do. One of the things parents can do is lead by example. A lot of parents have their own issues with math. A lot of parents have their own trauma. They experience their own trauma in school. And a lot of parents have deficiencies in not knowing multiplication facts, as an example, division facts, algebra. I think parents have to sit down and say, more parents have to sit down and say, look, I need to learn this. And if I learn this, then I can model this behavior for my children, because then my children are going to see me learning it. What I'm doing is I'm instilling value in this activity, mathematics, and I'm letting them know that like, yo, this is not just some like random extracurricular activity that happens to be a class that you got to take to get credit so that you can advance to the next grade, right? So parents, number one, I think have to start leading by example. That sounds easier. That's easier said than done.
They need to get past that shame too, you know?
They got to get past the shame. They do. But I think like when you ask about grade level, I think that plays a part also. A lot of adults once upon a time might have been in 10th grade or 11th grade, and somebody might have let them know like, yo, you have issues with adding fractions. You don't know how to add fractions with different denominators. And then they also realized at the same time when they was in 10th or 11th grade, like, wait, but that's elementary school math, right? Because we assign these grade levels to these different math skills, it makes you embarrassed. So you're like, oh, well, when was I supposed to learn that? Or a teacher might get mad in their own frustration and say something to the child when they're in 11th grade, like, yo, you should have learned that in 3rd grade. Why you ain't learn that? So then now you've told the child, okay, this was 3rd grade math. That was 8 years ago. It's little kids that are learning this right now. And you in 11th grade, you 16, 17 years old and don't know it. A lot of people are just embarrassed. So they're like, nah, rather than like you said, address the shame and go learn it and take a it's better late than never attitude, they just say, forget it. I'm just not going to learn it.
All right, there's a third part to this. I'll tell you there's 4 parts to this question, right? Third part is I heard you speak about this earlier. Well, you did touch on it. Parents taking ownership of their child's education, right? So you touched on that. You did mention this just now, and I heard you mention this in your previous interviews. Importance of parents healing from their own academic trauma. I remember when I was teaching, right? And a guy that was there for a while. It was my first parents teacher meeting, and I don't know if he told me before, he told me after, but he basically was breaking down how these parents really just have because they had a traumatic experience with school, they don't like coming up there, and when they come up there, it's like PTSD. I'm not sure if that's a proper term, but it's traumatic for them. You know, He said keep that in mind when you're interacting with the parent.
Right.
You have immense experience in education, right? What advice would you give to a parent who suffers from that trauma with education and with school?
I would say try your best to be more courageous, and when I say courageous, I mean like courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being scared but doing it anyway, because what's at stake is your children's ability to understand mathematics. And when your children see that you have a fear of mathematics, they at times will internalize that, and then they'll start to think, well, okay, yeah, this is difficult, right? But it's supposed to be difficult. But the child will see, okay, this problem is difficult. I don't know how to really do it. So instead of persevering and still trying to learn how to do it, they say, well, look, my mom can't do math. My dad can't do math. My grandparents probably can't do math. I got uncles and aunties that can't do math. So look, maybe this is just, this is just not for me. And then you got a lot of people saying things about like math genes and, then children start hearing that. And we find a lot of reasons to not try to excel. So we have to, like, as adults, address our own traumas and our own fears, and even me, like people, probably wouldn't think that, I got my own fears and issues with math, because I remember, even though through the larger duration of my K through 12 student school experience, for the most part, I was good at math, but I definitely had rough patches along the way. And so I know how it feels to sit in class and like not understand. I know how it feels how to sit in class and not even know what question to ask, because I really don't understand anything, any of this explanation, that the teacher was providing. So, and even sometimes now, like if I'm confronted with a math topic that I'm not as well versed in, that, that anxiety starts to creep in. But I gotta hold it at bay. I gotta regulate my emotion and check it and then remind myself who I am. Like, no, I really do this. But I understand I speak from a space of luxury and privilege because I do math every day. Like this is my livelihood. Like I do this every day. Like I'm doing math constantly. Whereas a lot of people aren't doing as much math as I do, but I still experience a similar feeling that they have. But you got to manage it and you got to persevere until you start getting right answers. Because I've gotten so many right answers from tutoring sessions, from teaching sessions, from years and years of teaching, it's a reminder that, no, I can do this, and I think that's a lot of it too. Like a lot of us just have to have the confidence that we can learn something. Like it's okay to not know it right now. Like that's cool. But having the confidence to believe that even though I don't know this right now, But if I dedicate time and energy and study toward this, I can learn it and I will understand it. Maybe give me a day, a couple days, 3 days, 4 days. Maybe I got to get a book and like sit down and read the book on a regular basis, practice some problems. Or maybe I got to watch some YouTube videos. Like somebody got to pull up my YouTube channel, all this math, right? And like watch some of my videos over and over again. But then you have the confidence that like, wow, okay, yeah, I didn't know this at this point. And now here it is a week later, 2 weeks later. Now I do know this. So you got to have those experiences, but you got to put yourself in position to be able to, have that experience.
There's a famous Amos Wilson quote, math quote that I'm paraphrasing, right? Why it's so important we didn't learn math. To identify our problems and solve your problems and now become a problem to the person's benefiting from your problems, right? Paraphrasing. I want to talk about the political necessity for Black children to be deficient in math, specifically in the area of critical thinking and finding inconsistencies and contradictions in life.
So that's one of the things that math does is like it trains your brain to think a certain way, like to think more critically, to think more analytically, because when we think about equations, right, when we test to see if an equation is valid or if an answer is true, right, or correct, we're looking to see if when we substitute that value in for the variable, does the left side equal the right side? It's similar to like if you think somebody's lying to you, you might say, yo, something ain't adding up, right? Because something, this ain't right. Like basically it's an equation. This equation don't balance out. The left side don't equal the right side. You trying to tell me that, this is 58 is equal to negative 14. Like, no, 58 is not the same as negative 14, right? Something's not adding up. So when we do, the more and more math we do, we're training ourselves to think in a certain way, to think and be able to recognize contradictions. Like 58 equals negative 14. That's a contradiction. Like it's not true. It's not valid, right? And then that can apply to, political situations, political arrangements, economic situations, different social relationships. Why does this community get more resources than our community, right? Or why, to even think about that and not just think, oh, well, that's just normal. That's just how it is. Well, maybe that's not how it should be. And then we start to think about, well, how can we change this? But first, even recognizing it as a problem.
Identifying it.
Because you got to be able to identify problems. Like math is a system of problem solving, but math also enables you, a math approach, it also enables you to be able to identify problems. Whereas like a lot of times, a lot of people don't even know how to identify a problem.
It's a big problem, bro.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, because you can't solve nothing if you don't you can't even diagnose it. You go to the doctor, like they can't like cure something if, they can't even diagnose what the problem is in the first place. So a lot of us don't have the ability to do that. And I think it is a political necessity, like, the late Amos Wilson referred to and talked about, because it helps to maintain the status quo. Because if you think of the Black community and the persistence of a lot of the problems that we have as a collective, right? And the fact that so many of us can't identify problems, don't know what the problem is. But then even if the problem is identified by ourselves or for us, we don't have really a methodology to be able to think about how to solve the problem, right? So a lot of times we just kind of just go along to get along because we're not thinking on a certain level.
And I love the example you gave, because in regards to problem solving too, and the ability to think, identifying the problem in a dualistic way from an individual level and a collective level. Because how we would solve this problem on an individual level is not the way we would solve this problem on a collective level,
Right. And I think of a math example with that. I think about like systems of equations, right? In a system of equations, you typically have like, a ninth grade student taking algebra 1 or eighth grade student taking algebra 1 might have to learn how to solve systems of equations. A system of equations is where you have multiple equations, probably two equations with two variables inside of them. And you got to solve for both variables, right? So, but within those equations, you got single numbers, you got constants, you got single variables, you got plus signs, minus signs, right? That's like the individual approach, right? But then the system is everything working together, right? So it's very different, like how you solve a single equation, right? Just one equation versus how you solve a system of equations is very different, right? So it kind of is a model for like our lived experience and our lived situation, right? You got the collective, right? But then you got the individual, right? So as an individual, you might look at it like, well, I'm cool, I'm good. You know, my household is cool. I'm straight. My bills are paid. You know, I'm driving my car. I can put gas in my tank, whatever. You know, but then as part of a collective that is collectively losing, you know, things may be very different. So, and a lot of times we're put in situations where we have to, you know, we make gains individualistically at the expense of the collective. And that's something that we got to start thinking more about, because no matter how good you may feel as an individual, if you're part of a weak group, then, you know, you're not safe. So that's something we really got to start thinking about, you know? But a lot of us at the same time, we just don't think we can win as a collective. So a lot of people are just like, well, I don't think we can win. Even if they don't articulate it and admit it, they're just like, yeah, I just got to do the best I can for me and mine. And that's fine. I get that, and I understand where that sentiment comes from. But I just want people to understand that if you take that individualistic approach, you're still not safe, because if you're part of a weak group, even if you feel like you're winning, I'm gonna just go over here and try to win as an individual. As an individual, like, you're not safe. So we got to figure out a way to try to like build up the collective.
consequential thinking, right, is about considering the likely outcomes of one's behavior before acting. It involves the assessment of the upsides and downsides of various courses of action. How can consequential thinking save our black boys from being victims of crime, violence, and the criminal justice system?
Well, I mean, just the act of like considering potential outcomes, you know, probability, you know, what's going to happen if I do this thing? What's going to happen if I don't do this thing? You know, it doesn't mean that they'll necessarily, you know, always do the right thing, you know, because they're young, you know, and impressionable, and, you know, they might be, you know, a little hot headed and whatnot. But at least if they're considering like, yo, if I do this, then I might go to jail for the next 10 years. And then that leads to another question of, okay, do I want to be in jail for the next 10 years? And then when I'm in jail for the next 10 years, what am I going to be doing in jail for the next 10 years? And what am I not going to be able to do because I'm not at home with my people on my block, you know, in my community and whatnot? A lot of times when those decisions are made that lead to those negative outcomes, that's not even a thought. That's not part of a thought process, because there is no thought process.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to say I actually learned consequential thinking through sports.
Mm-hmm.
And kids who aren't fortunate enough to play sports or do other activities, I think that it should be a key component of math lessons for our
Yeah.
demographic, because, as you stated and you experienced, like, people don't understand. People aren't really, they're not, the consequence is not even a thought in this person's head because they didn't learn. It's a skill. It's actually a skill to think about the consequences
Right.
that they never learn, you know?
And when you think about like, you know, even in business, if you go to college and study business and you think about like cost benefit analysis, it's like you're constantly just thinking, okay, if I do this, then what are the potential outcomes? And then you can decide, okay, well, boom, this is like, this outcome is going to lead to the most profit if profit is my goal. So then, okay, well, I want this consequence, so I'm gonna go in this direction. The thing, one of the ways in which it connects to mathematics is through word problems. Because when you really get into word problems, you know, whatever type of word problem it is, most word problems are generally set up like this. You're given some information about a scenario, could be anything. And then you're asked the question, well, if this is the case, then what would happen in this situation? Or what would happen if, if it's a distance, rate, time word problem, and somebody's driving a car at a certain speed, and when they drive at a certain speed, it takes this much time to get to this place. And then they say, well, what's going to happen if we increase the speed, right? All word problems are just exercises in consequential thinking. So what I advocate for is like more word problems, you know, for students to be exposed to more math, and specifically within math, more word problems, because that, again, it trains their brain into thinking consequentially, because you're constantly thinking, okay, well, if this happens, then what's going to happen as a result? And you're actually learning how to do calculations to figure out what the result's going to be.
And that reading comprehension, bro.
The reading comprehension is required too. And I think, and that's another important thing as well, because then we can expose also the fact that we need to be able to read in order to do math, so we can stop telling people this, like, you know, or promoting this false dichotomy between being a reading person versus a math person. Because you can't be a quote unquote math person if you can't read and don't have a reading comprehension, because you won't be able to understand what you're being asked to do mathematically, right? So that's another thing, and a lot of times too on that topic, there's a lot of people have reading comprehension challenges that are masquerading as math challenges. Because I've had a lot of students that, boom, I give you the equation, right? 3x plus 5 equals 20.
They good.
And you good, you can solve it. You know how to
Once they
solve
get
it.
in a
Boom, boom,
word
boom.
problem, yeah, I know how to go. Yeah.
But if I give you the word problem that you have to read, comprehend, understand, decode, pull out the pertinent information, pull out the pertinent numbers, know how to set them up, set up the equation, 3x plus 5 equals 20, and then solve, you can't get to the 3x plus 5 equals 20, right? That's not as much of a math issue as it is a reading comprehension issue. So we got to address that. So we got to figure out how to combine, reading with mathematics and start to look at reading and mathematics as, commingling. We got to commingle those instead of like this like divergence that we have. Like I'm a reading person. I'm gonna stay over here. I'm a math person. I'm gonna stay over here. It's like, nah, that's not reality.
I think too, man, we need to promote the skills in regards to survival.
Mm-hmm.
I think that conversation is not given to children enough in regards to like, that's what I used to present it, kind of put school to the side. We talk about surviving out here, and I think that needs to be the rhetoric that they hear. Like, you need these tools to survive out here. You need to know how to read. You need to know how to do basic math.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's so much propaganda around like the futility and like the irrelevance of math, right? That people just buy into, right? Because as I said, like it's a political, like as Amos Wilson said, it's a political necessity that our children not excel in mathematics so that they won't be able to compete for job opportunities. So it's an economic necessity as well, right? So you buy into that, and then it's like you self-disqualify yourself from even competing, right?
And getting exposed too, man. Like,
Yeah.
you need to know basic math, especially when you're out here doing the most basic transactions, understanding your loan agreement, understanding the profit you're supposed to get from basic stuff, because that's the basis of exploitation, your ignorance in math.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on, and you can't analyze and understand that you're being taken advantage of.
And the fact that it's so normalized, there's so many of us are being taken advantage of and not even knowing it. Like, I tell students all the time, like, somebody will take advantage of you with a handshake and a smile, and you won't even know it. And you'll sit there, shake their hand, smile back at them, like y'all cool. And they're robbing you. You just signed a contract where you're going to be robbed on a consistent basis because you didn't understand the mathematics that was involved. And it's like, a lot of times it's normalized, because so many people have math deficiencies. Almost, and we see it because a lot of people, they don't have as much shame involved with not being proficient at mathematics as they do with not knowing how to read the English language per se, right? Nobody would really admit, man, I don't know how to read. I don't really know how to read. But people like will easily admit like, yo, I was never good at math. It's almost like people are trauma bonding. They like to find other people that's not getting this. You'll find it's easy to do. You'll find people that just weren't as good as math, but good at math. But I think that we got to really change. We got to change that, like how we regard mathematics. Like, mathematics is like treated like it's like an extracurricular activity, and it really shouldn't be. It's got to be treated like it's something that is like urgent and something that's really mandatory. So it's like if your child doesn't understand mathematics, your child is not proficient in mathematics, and your child doesn't know how to think mathematically and can't function in algebra, geometry and whatnot, there should be a cause for alarm. Like, we got to stop letting it slide. Like, oh, well, I just want them to pass and get a C. It's like, yeah, they might get a C, but they don't really know math. Or they might have took geometry in 10th grade and got a C. And you as a parent, you feel, okay, well, they didn't fail. They don't got to go to summer school. But it's like, they can't have an intelligent conversation with you about geometry, right? None of the theories, none of the postulates, they can't like solve a problem, and that's another thing too that people don't really realize, like with a class like geometry. In geometry, we kind of get caught up in like all the shapes and the angles and the circles and all that and the formulas. But really, geometry is about teaching people how to make a logical and valid argument, because if you think about a geometric proof, it's like, I'm going to give you some information, right? And then I'm going to ask you to prove this based on that information. So then you got to go through a sequence of steps to arrive at that conclusion. You can't just say, which is what a lot of people do, well, I just feel like this is like this, or I feel like that angle is equal to that angle. Like, so what? Like this, in this particular situation, not to devalue feelings. Our feelings are important as human beings, but in this particular situation, it's facts over feelings. And you have to be able to provide facts that can substantiate your claim, right? And that's what geometry teaches you how to do. And it also teaches you, in terms of problem solving, how to go from a starting point and arrive at an ultimate solution to a problem where you may have to solve other smaller problems first. Because you may not be able to go to, okay, well, yeah, this angle, because of this angle is equal to that angle. Nah, first thing you got to do is you got to prove that this angle is equal to that angle. And this triangle is similar to this triangle. And then once you know that, you got to prove that this leg of this triangle is half of this leg of that triangle. And because of that, you got to figure out something else. Then you got to figure out something else. But that's how life is, right? We're problems that we are approached with. Like we may have a big problem, and then we say, okay, I got to solve this big problem. But before I can solve this big problem, I got to solve these little problems. And I got to be able to build up, but I got to do it in a systematic way, because if I don't do it in a correct and systematic way, I'm never going to get to the solution to the big problem. So that's another thing that geometry does, and other math courses do that too, but definitely geometry, because it's really just about problem solving. It's really just about teaching problem solving. But that's something that, I think about Kwame Ture and, Charles V. Hamilton, when they published Black Power back in 1968. I think about that book, and I think about, what powerful people do. Like powerful people are able to identify problems and solve problems, right? And powerful people also have options, in terms of how to go about problem solving. So, and these are also skills we can pick up in math, because in math, there's a lot of options in terms of how to solve a particular problem, right? Whether it's in algebra, geometry, even with arithmetic, with the young people, like there's so many different ways to multiply two numbers, so many different methods and all that. So another thing I want to impress upon parents watching this is that when the school might send home a homework assignment and the child is specifically asked to multiply using this certain method, but it's like, as a parent, you looking at it like, well, why can't they just do it this way? Like this, how I learned it 30 years ago. Why can't we just do this? This new math is dumb. I hate this stuff, right?
What are your thoughts about this famous saying, not everyone is made for college?
I got a few thoughts about that. I think a lot of that is economic, because, I don't know that people that qualify for full scholarships to college ever say that. I think it's really an issue of, well, I don't think financially I can afford to pay for college. So I think a lot of people say it as a result of that, or people feel that academically they won't be able to perform on a college level, right? I do want to caution people though, because when people say like, well, college ain't for everybody, or I'm gonna go to a trade school or vocational school or something like that, it's almost like they have this like kind of attitude that, well, those schools are gonna be easier.
Yeah, running the problem the same way.
And
I'm not difficult.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna have to really do work. I'm not gonna have to really think. I'm not gonna have to be responsible and submit assignments. It's like, bro, like you still gonna have to like, do work.
Don't they have a higher dropout rate than traditional four-year colleges?
I don't know the data on that.
I think I swore I read that, man.
But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. So I think, college, and I think another thing about college too is when we look at these examples that, people try to use to substantiate the claim that, college is useless or college is a scam. I think that we have to, in terms of it being a scam, we could talk about the endowments that a lot of colleges have, the huge multi-million-dollar, some billion-dollar endowments that colleges have, and then they're still charging certain amounts for tuition and fees and room and board and whatnot. I think that part is questionable. But I think we got to look more specifically at what people are studying, like what majors people are choosing.
Yeah.
And this is where the math comes into play, because we know of a lot of people. I went to school with people. I've had students that have probably done the same thing in the past 20 years when they went to college. They choose a major based on the proximity to math courses, meaning they're like, yo, like I was never that good at math. I don't like math. So I don't really know what I want to do, but I know I need a major. What major course of study will require me to take the fewest math classes possible. And that's how a lot of people choose their major. And it's really sad and unfortunate. And, it's also sad and unfortunate that the colleges don't oftentimes have the appropriate resources to help people get past those math
more
deficiencies.
remedial classes.
Yeah, well, the remedial classes are there, but a lot of times even those are not taught by people that really know how to teach math. It's a professor that kind of gets stuck with the class, and and then I think a lot of times with the professors, a lot of them are I don't know if they have the ability to really address those learning gaps that those students have. And there's a lot of I guess condescension and disgust on the part of the professor, because they're this is college. Why am I teaching people how to multiply 2-digit by 3-digit numbers? What's going on here, right? But that's a real thing.
I experienced that personally. I'm not gonna say the man's name, but I remember his name clearly. My freshman year, he gave me back a paper. It was all red, and the man asked me how I got into the school. Straight, and he told me just drop his class because I'm not gonna pass.
In the remedial math class?
No, this was English.
On English, okay.
Whatever, understanding lit. First
okay.
one, yeah. So he told me straight up. Man asked me how I got into school.
Yeah, that could be damaging, man.
So I understand the disgust still. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I wasn't that far behind. I want to keep it there. You know what I'm saying? I probably wasn't the level this man wanted, but I wasn't that far behind. Obviously, it was a racial undertone, and I hooped. He probably had an issue with that. Nonetheless, I ended up taking with another teacher. I did very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. He told me that, man. So it's just all right, that's cool. But I experienced that in regards to that academic disgust, and what I noticed in high school somewhat, but with college is that they're not teachers.
Right.
You may be well versed in that subject matter, but you don't understand the art of teaching.
Yeah.
So I think that's the disconnect with college professors.
Yeah, and I think so. I guess to that question, college not, or that comment, or that belief and idea that college not being for everybody. I think that if you're not an autodidactic, or you don't know how to really navigate that space and go get the knowledge and be responsible and submit assignments and kind of know your learning style. I think that's key too. You gotta know yourself well enough to know what your learning style is. So okay, what do I need to do when it's time to go to this lecture? Do I need to take notes? Should I bring a voice recorder? How should I take notes? All that kind of stuff, all those details.
I actually, man, because I feel college isn't for most people after teaching, because they don't have the skill set to get through college. Just based on what you just said. Yeah. You have to have you have to be self-learned, for those who didn't understand the term you use. Also, you have to have a certain grind, right, and a certain resilience. Do you have the courage to study a topic you know nothing about?
So that's true. I would agree with that.
And the high schools, unfortunately, I'm not saying all, but the high school I was at, it's they train the kids to just fail, bro. It's they just want to keep them sedated until they graduate, and they don't learn any self-accountability. This passing thing, we have this passing crisis that's going on right now. Passing kids.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And you passing them into destruction because the child is not learning, and the child's not held accountable for what they need to do to successfully meet the requirement of this class. So you've been passing high school, right? Even if you're behind, when you go to college now, you're expecting the same thing.
And you're just gonna fail.
All right.
When you get to college, you're just gonna
you
fail.
know what I'm saying? So that's the little vibe right there, But it's funny you brought it up. I experienced that firsthand, bro. Dude talking reckless to me. Man told me straight up, how did I get into school? I was like, damn, that's kind of tough. All right, cool.
And there's not a lot of accountability. Because I teach at Cheney, and I don't talk crazy to my students, even though sometimes I want to, but I don't. But I've heard stories about other professors, talking to them in certain ways, and
it could be crushing. You get what I'm saying? Because remember, I got a background in hoops, so I've been dealing with coaches, so I know how to process that and take it. But for another person that doesn't have the skill, that could be demoralizing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you need that. A lot of times, you want that validation. Because in K through 12, you might have got validation from your teachers, but then you get to college and you kind of expect it. It's like a lot of times college is like sink or swim. You got to be prepared for it.
No
you got to
be
prepared.
Yeah,
you got to be prepared to be on your own. So, yeah, I guess it's what I was saying is that it's about the preparation. But I think some people do just want to go to college just to say that they're going to college, or they think. But and again, you got to be prepared for that. And a lot of people really aren't prepared. We're not doing a good enough job, like preparing enough of our children. But it's like to my point, like I don't know of a lot of people with that qualify for full scholarships, or are very academically prepared, that are saying college is not for them. But other people may say that. But even with that, I think some people, sometimes it's a maturity thing, because maybe at 18 years old, maybe you're not really ready for that level of independent, academic activity or independent education, but maybe at 22 you might be ready for it, or 23. Like even myself, like I dropped out of college for 2 years, and I think part of that was, when I went back, I was like, because I dropped out, I was working, and I'm just making money, getting a paycheck, like, and I'm like, this can't be my life though, like, what I'm saying. And I had like 3 semesters left, so I'm like, I had an incentive to, like, let me just go finish, because let me get this degree, so I can like leverage this degree and like make other moves and do certain stuff. But without the degree, I wasn't confident that I'd be able to, like, make certain moves.
And I want to touch on, there is all right, so I've had this conversation with numerous people too. A lot of people need to go to college. Reason being is that I think people watching too much social media, and everybody think they're like some entrepreneur or something, and they can get all these things done without it, not understanding like you don't have it, fire.
Right.
This thing is real. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just don't have it in you. So I do recommend that people go to college at least to have that paper as a crutch, where worst come to worst, you can qualify for a 9 to 5.
Right.
But some people now with all this stuff on social media now, they believe now that they don't need, and there are a lot of skills you can learn in college too.
Definitely.
By the way, right? They don't need college. They're just going to go out here and do all these things, and they're going to find themselves in problems, because not only do they don't have the skill set or the work ethic to survive on their own, they don't have that paper to kind of get their foot in the door.
And entrepreneurship is not easy. Like you mentioned, social media. Like a lot of times, these entrepreneurs, like they're not telling the whole story.
But their business model is selling a package to you.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know much people that's really like kind of getting it. They just getting it. They're not really selling like a pack. You're in a service. You do math. That's different.
Yeah.
But you're not selling a plan guaranteeing people that you're going to make money.
Right. Right.
That is their business model.
I mean, it's a challenge. Even just, I think most of the time it's easy to get up and go to work when they're going to be negative consequences if you don't go, and if you don't get there on time. Meaning you might get fired, which means you're not getting your paycheck, right? As an entrepreneur, it's like you are your boss. You got to hold yourself accountable. So if you don't have that level of discipline, and I'm guilty of this sometimes, because sometimes I'm like, man, I know I need to get up at 7 a.m. this morning because I got these things I got to do. But I might hit the snooze button and be like, and then like stay asleep, and then not do what I need to do. But as an entrepreneur, it's not nobody, it's no white man that's going to come and like, fire me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that, we should need that. I think we shouldn't need that, but we have to get to the point where we're mature and disciplined and responsible enough to be our own, supervisor.
Most people, I would say in my life experience, most people need to be told what to do, and they need an outside source to hold them accountable. You get what I'm saying? Like, the only reason people go to their job is for basic survival. But when you look at their personal life, there's no consistency or accountability. So with that said, I think most people should just go to work and give thanks for that. And you're not corny for working somewhere or anything.
Right.
That's the thing they're putting out here now too. It's like you're like a loser for working with someone. That's not the case. It's just everything not for everybody.
Yeah. And you're gaining skills. You're gaining skills. Like I know a lot of, me, when I became an entrepreneur, I can honestly say that every skill that I gained from every job I ever had, whether it was my first job when I was 15 years old and I worked at the library stacking books, sorting and shelving books, using the Dewey Decimal System, and all the internships I did in college, and all the little jobs. I worked at Little Caesars Pizza, like back in the day when they used to sell the single slices. You know what I'm saying? Like back in the day, I was trying to get money for my prom tuxedo and whatnot. I use everything. You know,
Especially teaching. I don't know. I think teaching breaks a lot of people. They don't understand the skill set they have.
yeah.
But like I think teachers can be the greatest entrepreneurs because you if you're a good teacher, you're using so much skill sets every day that are
Don't even
applicable. You
realize it.
don't realize it, bro.
Yeah,
And I tell them, but they don't want to listen. But it's just like I think teachers would be the greatest entrepreneurs because it's like to be a good teacher and make sure everything is running solid. It's a lot of things you have to do
a lot of things.
that can transfer over to you being a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, and it's made evident when we get our evaluations. Like a lot of school districts are using the like that Charlotte Danielson model with the 4 domains. You know, so it's like you're doing things in those 4 domains, like planning and preparation. You got to do that. Instructional delivery, professionalism, classroom management. Like, it's so much going on at the same
You're dealing
time.
with 30 personalities every 45 minutes, bro.
Exactly.
And just because it's the same kids, it's a different personality every day because you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
And you have to manage all that.
And imagine you teaching like, you know, one year I taught, I wouldn't recommend this to nobody, but I taught like 5 different maybe 4 different classes. I taught I taught 2 sections of calculus, 1 section of pre-calculus. I taught an entrepreneurship class through the NEFTY program, and I taught 2 sections of my Black Philly class. It was African Americans in Philadelphia, but the students renamed it Black Philly. So, and then that too, like, so you switching, you know. It's one thing if like, you know, I've had other years where I taught algebra 2 all day, you know, and then I would notice like, yeah, my first class, you know, that lesson wasn't as good.
By the end of the day, they're going sharp.
But not even the end of the day, like the class right before the last class, because that's when I hit the like climax. It's like this the best, but like by the last period, it's like I fall off a little bit because I hit the high note.
First period, the weakest.
Yeah, first period is the weakest, and I always feel bad, like damn, like I wish I could have. Y'all should have seen my 4th period show.
And sometimes you think the lesson hit, but when you put it on them, it's like, man, I got to tweak everything. Change it around. Yeah, you're right, bro.
So the other sort of like that next to last period class, they get the benefits of, you know what I'm saying, like all the mistakes.
That self how do you say that?
Self-reflection?
Yeah, self-reflection. That value. A good teacher. The next person that's going to go through the day.
Being a reflective practitioner.
Being truthful with yourself. And also, I experienced 2 different classes, but I basically taught 7th, 8th. I taught all the classes. 7th to seniors, right?
Yeah.
And what do they call it? What's the social emotional learning class right now? SEL?
Yeah.
It was SEL and financial literacy.
Okay.
But I had to tweak it for the classes, for the ages. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The way I presented financial literacy to 9th graders, I couldn't do the same thing with the seniors.
Right.
So just having that ability to tweak the level and how you execute the message, it's a great skill to have, just dealing with people, yeah. You know, so I was saying all that to say is like teachers have the greatest transferable skills I see. And like taxi drivers and bartenders, because you have to deal with so many different people and different temperaments.
And it's like sales. Like as a teacher, teacher is sales. Like, because you're trying to.
Once they buy in, you good.
Yeah.
That's why people struggle with classroom management. They never bought in.
Yeah.
You know?
Because once I'm trying, and then especially like with math, it's like so many students are programmed to hate math, run from math, dislike math. And if I can figure out a way to get you to have an appreciation for math, it's like I've sold you on it.
One more skill we got to touch on, bro. With the managing of people, identifying who can help other students. Not just with the level, but socially. Like who, because you know some students don't rock with each other.
Yeah.
Even though that student knows picking the right groups to work together to help lower students.
That's management.
That's what I'm saying.
Delegating responsibility.
Yeah. How detrimental is the cultural addiction to feeling good and being comfortable a hindrance to the progression of Black men in this country?
I would say very, very, because a lot of times, you know, people end up doing questionable things just because they want to feel good. And sometimes, you know, you're not meant to feel good. You may have to do something that's appropriate, something that's balanced. You know, as people say, you know, in order to stand on business, sometimes you got to be uncomfortable. But if there's this like aversion to discomfort at all costs, then, you know, you might sell somebody out. You might throw somebody under the bus. You might not take responsibility for something that you are responsible for. You might not want to be held accountable. right? All because you wanna feel good. When we think about academics, I think about mathematics. This concept, productive struggle. You kind of watch, and you can tell a lot about, like, how people say, like, football is life or basketball is life, because how somebody performs on the football field or the basketball court can be indicative of what type of human being they're going to be or what type of character they're going to have. You can also notice certain things about people in an academic environment, in an academic situation. So you kind of look and see, like, okay, this student was given this problem or this worksheet or this list of problems in a textbook or whatever, and it's a little difficult, but how do they respond to that difficulty? Do they just fold and just say, nah, I ain't doing this, I'm cool, or do they say, like, nah, okay, let me try to get some help from my classmate right here. Okay, if that don't work, let me go up and ask the teacher a question, let me raise my hand, or let me just keep trying to fight through it. This is why we call it productive struggle, right? Not busy work. We're not trying to, like, punish students and just make them feel dumb, right? But it's productive struggle because that's part of the process, you know. But you notice, like, some students, like, they want to feel, it's not, it don't feel good though, like not knowing stuff. Like sometimes even with me, like I was talking to somebody recently about learning curves. Like sometimes I don't like learning curves, but I know it's reality, it's life. I don't like it, but it's life. After I, get onto a different part of the curve where I'm at the understanding level, I'm like, okay, cool, right? But, a lot of people, they never get to that just because they want to feel comfortable and they want to feel good. So it holds us back from growing, right? Young Black males, it holds them back from growth, and they become, like, stuck. It's like almost like it's like this, like it creates an arrested development because they just want to feel good. And sometimes with life, like, you're not meant to always feel good, because then that can lead to an unhealthy type of escapism where you may, resort to, like, drugs and alcohol because you just want to feel good, right? Sometimes you got to be able to be like, yo, man, like, I gotta man up and deal with this. Sometimes you gotta feel pain sometimes.
And that's why it's important to have if you don't have a father, but have a strong male figure, because it's a skill you need to learn. You get what I'm saying? I call it going into the forest or whatever you want to call it, but I just say, man, going into the unknown. I don't care how a man want to act tough. Majority of brothers are terrified of trying stuff, and they can't deal with things not working out. I'm not even going to use the term failure. They can't deal with things not working out the way they think it's supposed to work out.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that's just a natural process. And once you clearly understand that, you're able to do more because it's not personal. They take things not working out as personal. Like it's life burdening them or something, or it's the universe chastising them, not understanding why you just don't know what you're doing. So there's a lower probability of this thing working out because you don't know what you're doing. But you got to stay in there till you figure out how to do this thing.
Yeah, yeah. Like I got to a point in my career where I started to tell students, like, wait, when I introduce a new topic, I'm like, look, let me tell you up front. You're probably not gonna. I'm about to put the first example on the board and explain it to you. You're probably not gonna understand it. And that's okay. This is just part of the process, right? Because inevitably, you put a problem on the board, students are trying to copy it down, trying to make sense of it. They're like, I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm like, bro, you're not meant to fully understand it right now. You might have to, like I say, students all have, like, every student has a magic number that I call it. The magic number is how many examples of this problem do they have to do until they feel comfortable with it, until they have that aha moment where it clicks. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So then it's like, okay, like, every time they see a problem that looks like this, they know what to do. For some students, it might be one problem. You might have those rare students where it's one problem. I just got to give me one problem and I'm good. Some students might be 3 problems. Some students, it might be 5. Some students, it might be 8. You never know. That leads to other issues in the classroom too, though, because the student that has a magic number of 5 is looking at the student that has a magic number of 1. And they're thinking, like, okay, he got it or she got it after just doing one problem. I did one problem. I don't have any idea what I just wrote down. So then they want to give up because they're comparing themselves to somebody that they shouldn't be. They don't know that student's background. That student might have a tutor that they meet with twice a week. That student might have, had a father like me. That's a math teacher, math professor that was teaching them algebra when they were 6 years old. solving simple equations, started them off early, had a serious head start. They don't know. So it's like we oftentimes, and I always wonder about like how many adults are walking around like this today that at some point they started feeling like they weren't good at math and they classified themselves as a person that was not good at math only because they were comparing themselves to their classmates who had a head start or knew more than them about math or had more exposure to math, right? And then because they thought that it was a level playing field, they said, oh, well, if it's a level playing field and I'm not catching on as quickly as this person is, then that must mean that I'm never going to catch on. So I might as well just quit. And then it just became compounded year after year after year. You know, the other thing in terms of that, reasons why people think they're bad at math when they probably aren't. Think about students that have math teachers that didn't give partial credit on quizzes or tests. So imagine, let's take a rough example, 5-question quiz. Student gets two questions exactly right, working out, solving equations, whatever, evaluating expressions. So that's 40 points. The other 3 questions, they made small mistakes, might have left out a negative sign on one of them, divided instead of subtracted on another one. Maybe another one, they like mixed up the order of the steps. So they lost 60 points, end up with a 40 on the quiz. And they're thinking,
compared to a 70.
I'm horrible at math because I got a 40. And the teacher, with all their responsibilities, may not have had the opportunity to just like sit down with them and say, look, this 40 you got is not really indicative of your actual level of understanding, right? Even though you failed, right? You would have had 100 had you not, or you at least would have had a 80 if you didn't forget the negative sign and if you divided when you were supposed to, right? You at least would have had an 80.
And that's real talk, bro, because like that conversation to do so much to the child's confidence. But on the flip side, realistically with teachers, they just in there dragging. You get what I'm saying? And they don't have the time to, especially when you get into the 25, 30 kids,
Yeah.
They don't have the time to have that conversation, which is vital.
So it goes back to your other question about like parents, like advocating and being like more proactive, and parents have to do that, and I say this out of love, because I like a lot of times, with education conversations, especially as it pertains to Black parents, a lot of times I think there's a lot of internalized anti-Blackness that manifests itself, and people attempt to try to just attack Black parents, right? But I'm saying these things out of love because I want us to win, right? And in order for us to win, Black parents have to, be able to do more. But at the same time, they also have to have resources, So this is why, like I mentioned, like my YouTube channel is a resource. I want all Black parents to use my YouTube channel. My book that I wrote, How to Use All This Math, Volume 1. I want them to use that as a resource, right? So these are resources that I'm providing to the community so that we can do more. And it's not just, because I think it can be frustrating too if somebody tell me like, yo, Akil, you need to do better. Like, and I'm like, how? I don't even know how to do better. You know what I mean? Like, so it'd be frustrating to me. I'd probably push back and be like angry, and that I'd be less likely to do more because you can't just sit up there and tell me to do more, tell me to do better. Like how? Tell me because again, we got complex problems in our community, and complex problems require complex methodologies in order to solve those complex problems. So, but in a minimum, I mean, you got to be able to provide resources or at least like an action plan. Now once I give you the plan though, and I give you the resources, if you just negate it, then that's something different. Now it's not that important to you. You've made it clear that it's not that important to you. Or you don't think that this is as much of an urgent matter as I'm trying to say it is. That's different. Now you're on your own,
Well, we appreciate the reasoning, right? And can you let people know where to find you, your website, where to purchase the book, also where to get these free lessons on YouTube?
Definitely. So the website is allthismath.com. The YouTube channel, that's where the free math lessons are. So I started the YouTube channel back in 2020 during the pandemic because we were doing tutoring. When I say we, I say me and my oldest son, Naseem. Shout out to him. He's another math tutor in the company. And we realized like, yo, we can't tutor everybody. We want to. Plus, it's only 24 hours in a day, right? So we started the YouTube channel, which has pre-recorded video lessons and tutorials. At this point, we have close to 700 videos ranging from basic arithmetic, all the way up to calculus one. All the videos, well, most of the videos are infused with Black history, right? So you're gonna get like a Black history lesson in the beginning. I might be doing a video, teaching how to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. I might have my Thomas Sankara t-shirt on. So, with the hopes of, a young brother or a young sister watches the video because they trying to learn how to solve a quadratic equation, but then they're looking on my shirt like, yo, who's that? Who's Thomas Sankara? So hopefully you go Google, go find out who Thomas Sankara was after you watch the video, and then it's like you get a 2-for-1. So you're getting some Black history and you're getting the math at the same time. The book, How to Use All This Math, Volume 1, that's a guidebook for parents where I'm showing you how to prepare your children for math class. Prepare them for math class, meaning, so when they go into math class, they're not overwhelmed and bombarded by all these new concepts, unit conversions, proportions, ratios, percentages, fractions, because I'm showing you how to take everyday activities, things you already doing with your kids anyway, and I'm showing you how to leverage those and create teachable moments. So you become basically a math teacher, for your own child, just by doing very basic things, basic things that, won't make you uncomfortable, right? And the book is available on Amazon at this point, right? And that's How to Use All This Math, Volume 1. And we're on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, at All This Math. So definitely reach out to us, follow us, share some of the work we do. You'll probably see, on the YouTube channel, you'll see me and my daughter Asada, who's named after Asada Shakur. Me and her doing lessons, because I'm teaching math, but I'm also trying to model for the community parenting. And I think strong parenting requires and includes us being the primary educators of our children. So I'm like, yes, I'm a math teacher, I'm a math professor, but before any of that, I'm a Black man and I'm a father. And I have responsibilities to my children. So a lot of those videos that you'll see Asada in are like, I'm just like, listen, I have a responsibility to make sure that she knows how to do this. So I said, well, while I'm teaching her how to do this, I can share it with the community. So then, you might think, oh, well, I could teach my daughter stuff too, or I could teach my son stuff too, as you should. So you'll see her on the YouTube channel a lot. You'll also see on Instagram, me and her doing reels from my car, just, quick little 60, 90-second little reels talking about, different, activities, different little basic little things you can do to just develop math fluency and make math more normal. Because I think that's what's needed. Like, we don't have enough just math conversations. Like, Black people don't talk about math enough in a positive light. We talk about math in a negative light, but we don't talk about it in a positive light enough. And that's what I want us to do. I want us to like change the paradigm and start talking about math in a more positive light, so we can win and, improve our relationship with math and start looking at it as a viable tool instead of something to avoid and that we believe is irrelevant.